We're thrilled to have welcomed our first grandbaby recently. But growing this precious human hasn't been easy on our daughter. The unrelenting pregnancy fatigue really took it out of her.
One thing that helped was keeping her fluids up, and she loved Rehydrate. Rehydrate is an essential electrolyte drink made by some great guys right here in Brizzy. It's safe during pregnancy and breastfeeding and is like a magical little energy and hydration boost for mum and bub.
If you're growing a little human or are just feeling a little run down, grab some at Coles today.
This is the Happy Families podcast with Dr. Justin Coulson. We're Luke and Susie, and this is the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
And Susie, a very important question I want to explore with you. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up, Susie? Because I'm not...
Thinner.
Yeah. We are going to explore this whole concept because as a kid we always had dreams and aspirations, but I think in a sense it's so much more freeing as a kid to have dreams for our life than it is as a parent to have dreams for our kids, because it's very, very uncomfortable when we actually don't have as much control when it's not our life.
Well, this is exactly the thing, isn't it? Dr. Justin Coulson from happyfamilies.com.au. You had an interesting conversation recently about this.
Well, I catch a lot of taxis. You know, I'm in and out of airports and heading off to schools or organisations to run presentations about well-being or about relationships and family and parenting. And I'm sitting in a cab and I'm heading somewhere, and the cabbie, I had emails to deal with. I had phone calls to make, but the cabbie caught me at a vulnerable moment, I guess, and he says, "So what do you do?" And his name was I think it was Sunny, and he was from India. And I said, "Well, I write books about parenting, and I give talks about being happy and about being a parent." And he said, "I've got a question for you." And I'm like, am I going to get this cab ride for free if I give you all this free advice? He said no, and I said, "Okay, well, give me the question anyway." And he said, I want my son to be a pilot. How do I make sure that my son becomes a pilot?
Ooh.
Yeah, no, that's we've all felt it. I'm not sure we've all asked the question out loud, as we have our goals and our dreams for what they want to be.
Ideas of what our children could become, yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of, I did what you did, Susie. I was like, I don't want to tell him how to make his son a pilot. I mean, psychology has shown us that there are ways that we can make people do just about anything.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's necessarily healthy. And so I started this conversation with him around that idea. He was well-meaning. He obviously really loved his son and he just wanted the best for him. But the question made me feel so uncomfortable. I said to him, well, you know, what if your son doesn't want to become a pilot? And he didn't really respond to that. He was like, "Oh, no, he'll become a pilot." I'm like, "Okay." I said, "Well, are you just being controlling? Have you got unrealistic expectations?" I wasn't quite that blunt, but that was kind of where my questioning was going. I said, "What happens if he fails? How will he feel about himself because of the expectation that you've put on him?" And I'm thinking about all these questions and I'm talking to him about it. But what this taxi driver was really saying is, I'm a taxi driver and I don't feel good about myself because I'm a taxi driver and I want so much more for my son. His motivation was beautiful and wonderful. Yeah. And as we talked about that, I asked him a couple of questions. I said, what does success in life really mean? My comment was, my sense is that who your son becomes will be far more important than what your son becomes.
Yeah. I was thinking about that in the context of if I raise my children and they are honest and they have integrity and they're kind and they're loving and they're strong and they're leaders, I kind of probably don't really care if they're a cleaner or a doctor. If at the end of the day, I know that they're the kind of people who are still going to answer my phone calls. Because
that's
they're
all
all
about
those,
you, isn't it, Susie?
Because they're all those things.
Are they capable of answering mum's phone calls?
No, but what you're saying is essentially what I said to this cabbie. I said, we're into raising character.
Yeah.
Not pilots or doctors or lawyers or whatever it might be. But he was still really skeptical. I mean, you've just enunciated perfectly what I was getting at, but he wasn't getting it. So I shifted perspectives and I spun it like this. I said to him, tell me about your dad. What does he do?
Oh, good question.
And he went really quiet and he explained that his dad was very, very poor, still living in India, and he was basically living on this subsistence farming land where he just took what he could from the land and he was barely getting by. And I said, well, do you value him less because he doesn't have any money? And he was wonderful. He said, of course not. He's my father.
Yeah.
And I said, right. Do you think that your son is going to look down on you because you're a taxi driver? And he was really quiet. And so I explored a little bit more and I said, my dad is a furniture removalist. When I was a kid, my mum and dad had a furniture store and they had a truck sitting there. And so dad started moving house. His body won't do it anymore. But I said, I don't look at my dad because I've got a PhD in psychology and say, I'm so glad I turned out way better. I'd love to be half the man my dad is.
Yes.
And he's a furniture removalist because it's about character. It's not about who you are and what you become. And so I talked to him about what kind of dad he wanted to be. And again, we went back to this conversation about character versus possessions. I said, you've bought the lie that society keeps on feeding us, that it's all about what you've got rather than who you are. I said, it's not the way it should be. So we talked a lot more about character. And, at the end of the conversation, I said to him, how are you going to feel about your son if he doesn't become a pilot? Are you going to see him as a failure? Are you going to see him as unsuccessful? And he was great. He said, no, of course not. He's my son. And I said, but how will he feel about himself if he doesn't get to where you're pushing him to go?
Yeah.
And he went really quiet and acknowledged that maybe his son might have low self-esteem, might feel bad about himself, might see himself as a failure. And I said, so why do you want him to be a pilot so badly? He said, I don't know. I just really want him to be one. I said, well, how old is your son? He said, he's just turned 2 months.
And we laugh.
I'm
But
so glad we had the
honestly-
conversation when we did.
Wow.
Honestly, we've all struggled with this little thing inside of our head of what we want for our kids, and we ultimately want better for them, even if we
Yes.
had it good. We still want better for them than
But
we
is
had.
better more money,
Yes.
more prestige?
Good
Yeah.
question.
That's the lie that we keep
Yeah.
buying, and that's the purpose of that. I mean,
Yeah.
this is a true story about a conversation I had with the cabbie who bought the lie, and I think that you've just. I'm not saying that you've bought the lie, but you've said, "I want better for my kids."
Yes.
And what does that mean?
Yeah.
Exactly. My dad, I lost him. What is it? 18 months ago or so. And I love him. I love him dearly. We are completely opposite people. We were never. The only thing we had in common in life as I grew up was we liked cricket. Outside of that, nothing. Like completely different personalities. And he got it so right and so wrong on this issue that we're talking about, the character versus the what you do, the who you are versus what you are. He so desperately wanted me to have a grasp of a strong work ethic and being able to serve people and be a wonderful worker. But the only expression of that he had in his life, where he was a farmer, he was a truck driver, he was a physical labour guy. And I am anything but. I hate mowing the lawn. I hate any physical work. And my most vivid memory was at 15, Dad was at the end of his tether and he said, "You are just so lazy. You're no son of mine." And it was this mistake that he made, and we've talked it through, and we got resolution from that. But that was a painful memory for me because he was so desperate trying to teach me a work ethic. He didn't realise he had. He didn't realise where my work ethic applied. When I hit the workforce, when I started to be who I was, that he saw it come out, and he suddenly realised that he was just so busy seeing what he thought it should have looked like, he forgot to see me. And once he started to learn who I was, then we had some different conversations around that.
It's funny that you've picked the age of 15 as well, and I think that's really beautiful what you've shared. Parents will usually come to me when their kids are about 15, and they'll say, my child is so unmotivated, they've given up on school, they're going nowhere, they're doing nothing. How do I... And it's that whole... I'm worried about them. I want them to be okay. And I think that there's a developmental aspect here where some kids breeze through it, but a lot of kids are like, what's the point of all of this school? And I don't know who I am and I don't know what I want to be. Remarkably, most of them, once they get into their 20s, suddenly learn how to work.
Yeah.
They learn how to look to the future. They learn how to set goals and plan. Why do they do that? Because we've set a good example for them. Shakespeare once said, "I would that there were no age between 16 and 3 and 20, or that youth would sleep out the rest. For there is nothing in the between but getting wenches with child, wronging the ancientry, stealing and fighting. Now, obviously, we don't get wenches with child anymore because we've moved on from that. The behaviour may still exist, but there's this thing called contraception now.
Yeah.
And that's from A Winter's Tale. But his argument is between about 16 and 23, that late adolescence stage, parents lose all control, and the kids will do whatever they will do. And there are some parenting experts who will say, it's my way or the highway. And I've watched too many kids say, fine, it's the highway.
Yeah.
And they're even more likely to make bad decisions once they're out on the highway than when they're within the walls of our own home. We've got to be able to just accept that they've got to work out who they are. And the more we try to push them to be a pilot or push them to be a hard worker on the land and mow their own lawn or whatever it might be, the more we actually rupture the relationship and alienate ourselves from them and alienate them from our influence. If we can be kind, compassionate, understanding and help them to become who they really are, we keep that relationship strong, and as they get older, as they develop, as they mature, that will come back to be a wonderful gift in their life and our lives and ours.
Because this is the important thing. My dad, this guy who wanted his son to be a pilot, these are expressions of we've got a conclusion, and as long as we have that conclusion, we miss them actually being the best that they can be, because our conclusion can't fathom. It usually limits what they're actually going to be able to do with their life. So the character and the development, the steps to give him everything he needs to potentially be able to become a pilot is a different story to forcing him to be a pilot.
Super. Yeah. And we can set things up so that he might actually have that desire. And if he wants to be one, we can facilitate that.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't, if he wants to be a drama king, if he wants to be a drama student and be an actor on Broadway, and we just want him to be Dead Poets Society. Dead Poets Society. Here's this kid who just wants to be on the stage, and his father is dead set against it because he's got these aspirations for him, and the tragedy of that, of course, is in that fictional story the boy took his life, but it happens in real life too. Let them be who they are, set them up to be successful, and stop worrying about, are they going to be better than me financially? Because it's a lie. So long as they've got enough to get by, so long as they can feed themselves, put a roof over their head, they'll be okay. Let them do what matters most to them.
Beautiful. Such a good discussion. Focusing on who we want our children to be, not what we want them to be. I just love that so much.
Yeah, we're trying to work out what we're going to force our 3 kids to be when they...
One's a hairdresser, because I could...
I've got 6 daughters, but I really want a mechanic. And I really, really want somebody who knows how to, build extensions on houses. What do you call them? Carpenters, builders.
Come in very handy. That's exactly right. I need someone to help me with my IT. I've got a whole lot of things to help around the radio studio. It'd be great.
You probably need more children.
Yeah. Oh, well, Justin said it, Suze. And he's the man. He's the man from Happy Family. He's the man from happyfamilies.com.au. It's what he said.
Well, there are loads of resources on how to get this parenting thing right at the website happyfamilies.com.au. But if you are interested in having Dr. Justin Coulson come and speak at your school or community group or organisation, you can find out more at justincoulson.com.